Hello, hello. Okay, here we go. Okay, I think we're about ready to start our next session. If you would all come on in. I think we're going to just shut the doors. Well, welcome to those of you who weren't here for the first hour. At this point, we're going to be talking to candidates for the House of Representatives. So I'd like to welcome you and thank you for the forum for the Minnesota House of Representatives District 21A Candidate Forum. My name is Diane Eisenbry, and I'm a member of the Red Wing League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that promotes active and informed involvement of citizens in the voting process. The League of Women Voters of Red Wing does not support or oppose political parties or individual candidates. The League of Red Wing sponsors candidate forums to give voters the opportunity to hear and compare candidates' stands on issues. Opinions are expressed of the candidates and are not the opinions of the League of the Red Wing Women Voters. Each candidate will have the following time limits: a 1.5 minute statement for the opening and for a closing statement. So 1.5 minutes for each. Candidates answer each question. They will also be able to be timed at 1.5 minutes. A timekeeper will hold up a 30-second card and a stop card, and they're seated right here in the front, to remind each candidate of their response time remaining. In order to prevent any interruptions of the forum, please turn off your electronic devices. So phones off. This event is being broadcast live on Red Wing's Channel 6 in its entirety and will be available for viewing later. Consult the Channel 6 channel for viewing times. Because this event is being photographed, recorded, and broadcasted, by entering this event space or remaining in this event, you consent to be photographed or recorded. Please see the crowd release poster displayed at the entry for more information. If you do not wish to be photographed or recorded, please do not remain in this event. Now, tonight's moderators are Barb Ekstrand and Catherine. Yes, they're both here. Barb Ekstrand and Catherine Reinder. So we'll begin the forum.
Again, welcome, and thank you for coming to tonight's candidate forum for the Minnesota House of Representatives, District 21A. My name is Barb Ekstrand, and I'm a member of League of Women Voters Red Wing. The candidates will each be answering questions that they have not seen in advance. You, the audience, will be offered paper and pencils to submit your questions. When you have questions, please raise them high and wave your hand, and someone will pick them up. All questions will be screened by a neutral league committee. Questions will not be asked if they are illegible, on personal matters unrelated to the elective position, unclear, inappropriately hostile, or submitted for the purpose of making a statement rather than information. The candidates have been given the agenda in advance of this forum and have agreed to the following. Each candidate will give opening and closing statements. Candidates will then answer questions in rotation within the stated time limits of 1.5 minutes, and I encourage them to address the audience. So again, we have Lori Ann Clark and Barb Haley, and they are seated. They drew numbers so that it was random as to who was starting first, and so we'll start with Lori Ann with the first question. Or first of all, actually, I'm going to ask them to give their opening statements. Lori Ann.
Hi, I'm Lori Ann. I'm a business owner from Cannon Falls, and for the last 20 years, I've been running an electronics manufacturing company. But tonight, I'm asking you for your vote to be your next House of Representatives legislature. And the reason I'm doing that is because I'm just sick and tired of the partisan games that are going on in St. Paul. and the gridlock that exists that's holding our future hostage because we rehash the same issues over and over and over again. You know, I want the same government that you want. Good government at a fair price without all the drama. And this is what else I see. We need a current and future workforce that can compete in today's global economy. We need the infrastructure, the roads, the bridges, the housing, the childcare, the broadband that actually helps our families, our farmers, and our businesses succeed. And we need our people to be able to pay their bills, to put food on the table, to pay for childcare, health care, to fund their health insurance premiums, and to save for their retirement. And the truth is, a lot of people are struggling to do that right now. Our government does play a role in whether each of us succeed or fail. And that's why it's time for change. It's time for us to have a government that works for and includes all of us. So we can stop the games, and we can get the work done, and we can give everyone an opportunity to succeed.
Thank you. Barb?
Thank you, and thank you everyone for coming tonight. Instead of just telling you my resume, I want to share a few stories that'll kind of define why I do this work and why I'm so humbled and proud to serve you in District 21A. First, a little story. Think of a teenage girl who had the opportunity to live in Germany during the Cold War and traded her Levi's and her nylons to other students that were living under communist rule. Think of 3 little babies that were born prematurely and died because they didn't have access to technology that could support their tiny lungs. And think of 2 kids that were born to single unwed mothers, impoverished in Colombia, and somehow found their way to a Midwestern family. Those stories are the most impactful moments of my life and define what I believe and what I bring to represent you in the legislature. I believe in free enterprise. I believe in the American dream, the freedom that we're afforded in this country. I believe in opportunity for all. I believe in the sanctity of life. I believe in education as the pathway forward to opportunity and prosperity. And those beliefs then define what I work on your behalf in St. Paul. I work on providing health care that we can afford close to home. I work on education reform and funding. I work on transportation. And I work on workforce issues and daycare and housing. I look forward to our conversation tonight and telling you more about those policies. And first, I just want to thank you again for the opportunity to serve these past 2 years.
Thank you. Now, the first question will be answered by Barb. Can Minnesota provide affordable medical insurance for everyone?
Thank you for the question. That's really the number one issue, I think, on most people's minds. It was the number one issue 2 years ago when I ran, and it was one of the main things that I worked on in the legislature. I serve on the Health and Human Services Committee. We passed some significant reforms, and we also did quite a bit of funding to help lower healthcare costs. I do believe that Minnesota had one of the best systems in the United States before the ACA, what's also called Obamacare. And it's going to take us some years to kind of work our way back. The market has fundamentally changed in the past 7 years, and we're dealing with that disruption. Some of the things that we'd like to do, we have our hands tied because the federal government sets the rules that we have to operate under. But I'll tell you the things that we did get done. We passed a 25% premium reduction for those folks that were buying on the individual market and facing just extraordinary costs. We passed a reinsurance model that helped lower those individual rates by 12 to 17%. And we also then reinstated this reinsurance model to help cover those that have pre-existing conditions and real high medical costs. With that being said, we did some additional reforms. I don't have time to go into all those. But it's a process. There is more to do. I am keenly aware that this is the number one issue impacting our district, and in fact carried legislation to provide further change at the federal level.
Thank you. Lori?
So I also am hearing that healthcare is the number one issue out there talking with all of you. And here's the interesting part. 90% of Minnesotans are already covered by their employers, the government, or the VA. Okay? But you're still concerned. You're concerned about high deductibles. You're concerned about covering, your premiums. You're concerned about the prescription drug costs. And none of those solutions that she's talking about address those issues. That 25% premium reduction, that cost us $850 million to take care of about 166,000 people. Our healthcare system has a huge administrative burden. When you go to the hospital or clinic, over 30% of the cost of that visit is just administrative paperwork. We also have incredibly irrational pricing. In one place, a procedure costs $1,000, in another place, it costs $6,000. None of the reforms that they're talking about address those issues. Comprehensive healthcare reform, such as the Minnesota Health Plan at mnhealthplan.org, does. I urge you to check it out.
Thank you. Okay, next question. We will start with you, Lorianne. What is your opinion on age or term limits for legislators?
I'm sorry, Barb, but I'm hearing impaired and I wear hearing aids, and you're not that close to your mic, and I'm having trouble hearing you.
Thanks for telling me. What is your opinion on age or term limits for legislators?
On term limits for the legislatures.
Term limits.
Yes, okay. So that's a double-edged sword, because of course, as Barb will know, being a first-term legislator, there's a lot to learn in a short period of time. And you get in there, you want to try to make an impact, and there's a certain amount of time that you need just to get up to speed and learn things. On the other hand, part of the reason that we have, I think, the gridlock and the games and the special interests that have hold of our political system is because people have been there for so long that the lobbyists are perhaps too connected to the politicians, and they're not really serving the people that they were sent to represent. So I would say that if we're going to have term limits specifically for the legislature, the House of Representatives and the Senate in Minnesota, that you might put it at 10-year terms or 12-year terms, give them a chance to get in there, make a difference, and give them some time to do the work, and then move them on. But I don't think we want to make it too short either, because we want to give people an opportunity to have an impact.
Thank you. Barb?
It's an interesting question, and sometimes people think it has an easy answer. I think the best term limits happens in the voting booth. It is your right to vote for who you want to represent you and who you don't want to represent you. And you can vote somebody out of office, and that's a term limit right there. I mean, it's your voice in St. Paul, and it's up to the voters to make those decisions. I asked some of my colleagues about this because it comes up often just around the country in debates, and I looked at some other states that have tried it. And what they found is that what can end up happening, kind of an adverse effect that you don't think about, is then more and more power actually lands in the hands of the lobbyists because they don't have a term limit, and you're losing the continuity and the knowledge base and that institutional knowledge that helps craft really good legislation. You also could end up having a lot of legislation and policy done by staff, and that doesn't necessarily then represent the voice of the people. So it again can sound like a good solution to some frustration, but I think the better approach is your voice in the voting booth.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll start with you, Barb. Mm-hmm. What is your position on using public funds for private educational facilities?
If you can clarify, are you talking about schools specifically?
Private educational facilities, I believe so. Yeah. I'll just ask the whole question again.
Okay.
What is your position on using public funds for private educational facilities?
I guess I'll interpret that maybe you're speaking about charter schools or public funds via a voucher, or I guess I'm not really clear what you're asking.
Okay, I guess I can't tell you for sure either.
Maybe we'll throw it out.
We'll go with another question. Okay, we'll try this one. What is your position on gun control? Should teachers be allowed or required to carry guns?
Thanks for the question. That, again, was a very common question, and we addressed some various proposals this past year. I first want to say that it is horrific when you have any incident in any school or movie theater or anywhere in our country where there's been violence committed and people and families have been affected. We have a Second Amendment in this country, and I support the Second Amendment. We have a Constitution that lays out the framework and groundwork for how our country was established and how we operate, and we can't pick and choose which pieces of that we like or dislike unless you want to change the Constitution. So I first want to say that. I worked on quite a bit of this issue because I serve on 2 education committees, and first and foremost, we want students to be safe. So I did quite a bit of research on what could we do in the school setting to help ensure that. I am not a proponent of arming teachers. I'll be very clear on that. My proposal, and it actually passed, it was bipartisan out of the House and the Senate and went to the governor and was vetoed as part of a larger bill. But I advocated for school safety reform and actually got $25 million in monies to provide Safe Schools levy so that schools could hire additional resource officers, mental health officers, counselors. It was completely local control, but they could do additional things to ensure the safety of their students.
Thank you. Lorianne?
So this is an issue where Minnesotans are actually agree quite strongly to almost 80% of Minnesotans wanted action on some sort of gun control from our legislature this year, and nothing happened. And it's really disappointing when we're supposed to represent the people, our people being very clear that they want action taken, and yet you can't even bring a committee vote or any action being implemented. And so that was a real lost opportunity, I think, for the Republicans this year. I also do not advocate in any way, shape, or form to arm our teachers, because the problem is it's not about the schools. We know that violence occurs in the restaurants, in the theaters, in the schools, everywhere. And what we need to do is address the causes, not the effects. And Minnesotans, our veterans, our hunters, everyone wants us to take action on some common sense gun control. So I hope that in 2019 we can actually make that happen.
Okay, thank you. So Lorianne, we'll start with you. Will you fight to keep Minnesota from becoming a right-to-work state?
Yes, I would fight to keep Minnesota from being a right-to-work state, but I got to tell you, when I'm out there talking to you at the doors and someone brings up right-to-work, I say, you know what, people, this is not the issue you need to worry about. You know, I'm a business owner, and we all know that there's a workforce shortage out there. So if you're going to start talking about right-to-work, I'm going to tell you, I think you're missing the point completely. You don't have to worry about how you're going to fire someone. You need to figure out how you're going to find good quality workers that are going to help you grow your business, okay? So we need to shift the focus on this workforce shortage that we've got. I was at the DEED workshop last November. We're at the top of a 15-year cycle in which the workforce shortage is going to go down, down, down until we flip back up. And so it's more about finding, training, and keeping good, high-quality people. And so I think right to work is the last issue that we as business owners need to worry about right now.
Thank you. Barb?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Will you fight to keep Minnesota from becoming a right-to-work state?
That issue did not become come before the legislature last year, and I didn't hear about that from any of my constituents. So it would depend on if that would, become a significant issue. There's folks on both sides. We have very strong labor unions in our state. We have very qualified labor workers. Minnesota is known to have some of the best construction workers, metal workers, welders. So we don't want to do anything that harms the quality of that workforce. And I would agree that actually funneling more people into the workforce and increasing training and opportunity is where our focus is. If this came before the legislature this year, I would reach back out to the district that I represent and ask you, the constituents, what your views on it were at the time, because I'm there to represent your views.
Thank you. So Barb, we'll start with you for this next question. There is not enough affordable daycare available in Minnesota. What would you do to make childcare more affordable for working families?
Thank you for the question. I've actually worked on that a little bit in my volunteer capacity. I serve on the Y board, and we've had a task force for over a year now, partnering with the community of Lake City, as a matter of fact, on a daycare proposal. And we've done studies on the need and the cost, and just what are the trends in how many children will need to serve in daycare. So it's been something I've been involved with for quite some time. I would like to point out that we have a child care assistance fund. It's called CCAP at the state level. It's part of our social safety net, where we provide support for low-income families that need child care. Unfortunately, under the Dayton administration, $100 million of that child care assistance fund was dispersed fraudulently. So the first thing we need to do is make sure that we hold our government agencies accountable for how the money is being spent in these social safety net programs, so that the people that need it have access to it. And then I also think there's more work we can do, especially in rural areas where we struggle with access, whether it's in-home daycares or school-based or kind of institutional-based daycares. Regarding that access to child care, again, I think there's mechanisms that we can have to support folks that need some support. We need people in the workforce, so we don't want anybody to be on the sidelines, and if supporting their child care costs helps them stay in the workforce, then that's good public policy.
Thank you. Lorianne.
Thank you. This is a great question. I was down at the Lake City hearing that our Senate put on just a couple of weeks ago, and it was really interesting for me. Before the hearing started, I went around and I talked to all the providers that were there. How many kids do you have? Well, I have 12 and I'm maxed out. Every person that was there that did daycare, except for the corporate child care center, was maxed out. So they had no room to provide additional child care. But then when we came to the hearing and people started talking, they started talking about all the reasons why they would not recommend that anyone get into this business in Minnesota. And I have to admit, I sat there and I thought, okay, this is an opportunity where we need to figure out as a government, as a Department of Human Services, as to how we help small business owners, particularly the child care providers, do child care better. Whether it's the forms, they complained about the child care assistance forms in each and every county being different. They talked about the issues that they had with regulations with DHS, and they talked about the fact that it was such a stressful industry that they didn't want people to come into the business. So how are we going to get enough child care if people don't want to do this? And this is a place where I do think we have an opportunity to tweak our government processes so that we are actually supporting the small businesses that provide child care in Minnesota.
Okay, thank you. Next question, Lorianne. Please discuss your legislative approach to managing the immediate risk and damage from our changing climate.
One more time, please.
Please discuss your legislative approach to managing the immediate risk and damage from our changing climate.
So I think one of the interesting pieces that goes on in St. Paul right now is the complete denial that humans are involved in climate change. And so it's really, we really lack a comprehensive approach of how to address climate change because we won't even admit that it's a problem. And we have farmers that know that climate change is impacting their growing cycles, the weather. It's more intense, it's shorter. So we know we have climate change issues there. We also know that our industry is impacting our climate. And from a federal level, that's a big concern because we've got EPA regulations being rolled back right now that are actually going to make climate change worse for Minnesotans. So I think we need to, if we're going to come to the middle and actually get work done, then I think as a legislative body, we need to be willing to admit that we affect climate change and that we need to take action to protect our environment.
Okay, thank you. Barb?
Minnesota is actually a leader in one area that addresses this issue, and that's in the area of renewables. We have an energy mandate that calls for 25% renewables by 2025, and most of our utilities are already meeting that standard. And as you all know, there's quite a bit of wind and solar in our district, and those renewables have had some rebates and support by both the state and the federal government for a number of years. And they're to the point where there's a promising future for wind and solar, so those mandates for rebates will probably be ending because the marketplace is promising enough as it is. So I think we're doing some smart things in those areas. I am a firm believer in following the science and not putting in undue regulations that aren't science-based, that just harm our competitiveness and our ability to create jobs. So that's always would be a foremost consideration of mine. I also want to point out that we have to recognize that we need what's called baseload power. The wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine. So we need nuclear, coal, and gas to provide that sustainability and reliability in our grid. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. What makes a great leader? What steps have you taken to grow in leadership? Barb?
Thank you. A leader is both the shepherd and the sheep. And what I mean by that is a leader needs to talk to people. You can't create child care policy without talking to parents and teachers and child care providers. You can't create health care policy without talking to patients and doctors and hospitals and insurers. I pride myself in my service on your behalf in St. Paul is that I reach out to folks all the time. And when I'm considering legislation, I ask folks the pros and the cons, and whether it's a representative, a senator, or a lobbyist in my office, and they're telling me their case, I always ask them, well, what does the opposition say? And then I'll reach out and call the superintendent or call the sheriff's office or call the hospital administrator. Because you can look at policy and it might look good on paper, but you really need to consider what's going to happen when it gets implemented. And I think that's a hallmark of a good leader, especially in the legislative process.
Thank you. Lorianne?
Thank you. I think this is a great question because I think when I was working on my MBA at St. Thomas particularly, we would often talk about what's the difference between leadership and management. Because management helps get things done, but leadership provides the vision. Leadership provides the overarching, the excitement, the passion, the reason why we're doing this, the reason we're here, the belief that we can make a difference. It's that enthusiasm and that energy that gets transferred from me to you that helps us decide to work together and get things done. And as a leader, there's so many different ways that we try to connect with other people. We recognize the things that we don't know, we ask questions, we listen to people, we connect with others, we have the adaptability to change our mind with new information, but most importantly, we are bringing forth the energy and the vision that allows us to get from one point to another. And a good leader not only provides that front leadership, that front passion and energy, but they know how to bring others along with them.
Okay, thank you. And now we'll start with you, Lorianne. What is your feeling about voting party lines? Will you vote contrary to party's position?
Thank you. I like this question, too. And the reason why I like this question, honestly, is because, my colors are purple for a reason. I've been saying out there on the door knocking that's not supposed to be about red or blue or left or right. It's supposed to be about coming to the middle and getting the work done. And I can honestly tell you that I don't think I'm going to have any problems reaching across the aisle or coming to the middle or voting across party lines, because I'm very comfortable saying where I stand, the reasons why I stand where I am, and being comfortable with that decision. And the reason I know that I'm not afraid to go contrary to my current party's policies and positions is I can tell you in my campaign I've already done it. I've already butted heads with the DFL party leadership in different ways that they want me to do things and run my campaign. And I came back saying, you know what, I hear you, but this is what I think is important, and this is how I'm going to run my campaign. And I own that decision-making process. And so for me, it really is going to have to be about coming to St. Paul, being able to listen, being able to find the middle ground. When I'm out there and I tell you most of us are moderates, I find all of you nodding your heads right along with us. All of us are getting tired of one end extreme to the other, and we want our politicians to come to the middle, find the decisions, find the compromise, get a good solution, finish that issue so we can move on to the other issue. And I am very willing to do that.
Thank you. Barb?
Thank you. Actually, 85% of my votes in the Minnesota House were bipartisan, and that places me in the top 10 in the House of Representatives as a bipartisan legislator. So the proof is in the action. When I ran for office, I talked to many of you, I said I'm an independent leader, and I have proven that. As I said previously, I take each issue as it stands on its own, and I consider its merits that way before I vote. Additionally, I was able to pass as a freshman. I carried over 50 bills. I passed over almost $30 million in bonding money to this district. That is highly unusual for a freshman representative. And I think that proves to you that I know how to work with people, and that we all represent different districts with different constituencies and different needs. And it's up to us to build those relationships, and first and foremost to have trust with the colleagues that we work with, regardless of what party they're on, so that we can get legislation across the finish line. And I believe I've proven I can do that.
Thank you. How can you manage the influence of lobbyists and be open with the public? Barb?
I think I spoke a little bit about that previously. The lobbyists, that tends to be a bad word to people, but I will tell you, not all lobbyists are bad. Lobbyists are a wealth of information because they serve as experts in a particular field. As a legislator, it's impossible to know everything about every subject. You could be what I call, an inch deep and a mile wide. So you rely on folks that have deep experience in different topic areas as you're addressing legislation. Some of those folks are staff, some of those folks are senior leaders that I look to for advice, and some of those folks can be lobbyists. So it's just as I build relationships with senators and representatives and staff and leadership, I build relationships with lobbyists, and that doesn't mean I am beholden to any vote or beholden to any money. It's a process of seeking out facts and research and good information, and that's the best way that I can make decisions then.
Thank you. Lorianne?
So I can tell you when I decided to run for office, I found very quickly just how much all of you want me to know about every issue right away, right now. And it is a little overwhelming. And those lobbyists do help give us a lot of information. All this information comes on these various issues that they want us to understand, what's important to them, and what they'd like us to see us do in the legislature. And so you're doing a lot of reading, trying to understand what the issues are, and knowing how you can make an impact. Because, of course, what we're looking for is we're looking for policies and laws that are actually going to improve people's lives. And because I don't know the issues, I don't know the issues that are important to snowmobilers or farmers or the teachers or the mental health issues. I do gather that information from both the organizations, the nonprofits, and the lobbyists to help understand what are the actions that they want taken that they think will help improve, our state. So, like Barb, I agree. They're a great source of information. I don't think that most of us are beholden to, the organizations that are trying to promote policy that improves Minnesotans' lives, and we need them to be able to gather all the facts and information in order to make informed policy and law for you and me.
Okay, thank you. We have a serious opioid drug problem in District 21A. What happened to the 1 penny a pill bill that had bipartisan support? Lorianne?
That's a great question, because I also wish that 1 penny a pill had passed. The opioid crisis is a big issue, but I will note that I listened to Stephen talk over in Cannon Falls at the triage group, and the truth is that meth is a bigger issue in 21A right now than the opioid crisis is in terms of drug use and drug abuse. Nevertheless, Big Pharma has helped create this crisis, and Big Pharma needs to help us solve it. One of the biggest frustrations about healthcare and prescriptions costs and mental health issues and drug and substance abuse is that the corporations and the organizations that help create these crises don't help fund the solutions. And what they've done is managed to shift the burden from them, the corporation, to us, the taxpayer. And so the penny a pill would have been a good start to help Big Pharma help fix the problem they created.
Thank you. Barb?
We debated the penny a pill for quite some time, and at the end of the day, the concern with that proposal is that cost would be transferred to the consumer, which basically would increase prescription costs. So that's why that package did not pass with bipartisan support. A contrary proposal was to have a licensing fee on prescription manufacturers of the pharmaceutical industry. If you open a liquor store in the state of Minnesota, you pay a licensing fee to sell liquor. And that seemed a better proposal, because that would be easier to be a business cost for that pharmaceutical company, and we could ensure that it wouldn't get passed on in higher prescription rates. I know that this is something we will address in the 2019 legislature, and we're looking at other models in other states and how they've done it and what's worked. I would also say that we have had many, many proposals to address the opioid crisis in different ways, whether it's awareness in high school, additional money for Nox, I'm not going to say it, Nox, the drug that I'm looking at Dr. Fair, the drug that can be given when somebody is overdosing. So additional supplies of that for our paramedics. So there were substantial reforms included in the package that was sent to the governor that he vetoed, and I'm sure that those things will come back up before us.
Okay, thank you. And this next question will start with you, Barb. Please comment on the state constitutional requirement that legislative bills pertain to one subject. How does the 990-page omnibus bill passed at the end of the session last spring conform to the state constitution?
Thank you for the question. That question of the constitutional rule has actually been brought before the Supreme Court a number of times before I served in the legislature. And it was upheld that the legislature was okay in having these bills of multiple topics. So it's something that seems to be asked every year, and perhaps it will be challenged again. I will tell you that during the first half of the biennium, when it's a budget year, you have bills that are categorized according to the budget. So you have an education package, a transportation package, a public safety package, and those bills are generally, received as being okay under one topic area. When you get to the second half of the biennium and you're dealing with either a budget surplus or a shortage, that's when you tend to have these omnibus bills because your session is shorter. You're trying to get a lot of work done in a small amount of time. And in our case, we were dealing with the governor who didn't want to engage until the very end. And therefore, we sent him a large package as one. I'd like to point out that the media made it sound like it was 900 pages that none of us had read. That is completely false. All those bills go through multiple committee hearings. They're passed out of committee. They're passed individually off the House and the Senate floor. So you have read those bills previously before it's all packaged up. Additionally, when you change a law in Minnesota, if you change one word, the entire statute gets reprinted. So that's why you get a 900-page bill.
Thank you. Lorianne?
Well, those bills were exactly the type of garbage bills that make me so frustrated with politics. And when I'm out there talking with you guys, you're in the same position. It's like we play these extreme games on both sides. And here's the thing. The Republican leaders knew with that 898-page bill that the governor was going to veto it. He's been very clear all session long that if they put certain poison provisions in, which they did, that he would veto it. And yet they wrapped it all together and put it in one big bill in the end, knowing that there were a lot of good policies and a lot of good legislation that should have been passed, but they wanted to score the political points more than they wanted to do the work for you and me. Pat Garofalo, the representative from Farmington, is a classic example of this. He thought it was great that we spent $0 on broadband for Greater Minnesota. I didn't, because we need broadband solutions in Greater Minnesota. And I'm really frustrated and tired of the fact that they cared more about scoring political points than doing the work that improves our lives. And that's exactly not the type of politics that you and I need in Minnesota.
Thank you. This is going to be the last question, so we'll start with Lorianne. Are you in favor of supporting legislation for sanctuary cities in Minnesota? Why or why not?
I'm sorry, for increasing what?
Supporting legislation for sanctuary cities in Minnesota.
Okay.
Why or why not?
So here's the interesting thing about sanctuary cities, okay? As our county sheriff candidates noted earlier, federal law, ICE, is federal law, federal funded, federal officers doing federal work. And when you come down to state or local level, and the feds want to use local resources and local dollars to do federal work, then you and I are paying for that out of our local taxes, which means that money isn't being spent for other goods and services that we need locally or on a state level. So when we don't have a sanctuary city, people don't call in. They don't call into the sheriff's office and report issues or drug overdoses or gunshots. They don't want to get caught by ICE, right? So sanctuary cities actually allow the local and state authorities to get the support of the community when issues are happening in our community, and allow our local dollars to be used on local needs rather than doing the feds' work for them.
Thank you. Barb?
First, I just want to make a comment to a comment that my opponent made about one of my colleagues, Representative Pat Garofalo. I just don't think it's appropriate to bring another colleague in and make an assumption about his opinion. So, regarding sanctuary cities, I am not an advocate of sanctuary cities. We are a nation of laws. Those laws need to be upheld. I am a proponent of our federal government solving on both sides of the aisle, solving this immigration crisis by reforming our immigration laws so we have a clear and respectable process for people to enter our country legally and have a process to become U.S. citizens and live under our laws.
Okay, thank you, Barb. Now we are going to have our closing statements, starting with Barb.
That time went fast. Thank you again for coming. I hope we were more exciting than the Vikings game that you're missing. Maybe they did better than they did over the weekend. It's been an honor and truly a privilege to serve as your voice in St. Paul these past 2 years. I'm proud of the work we did. We had an historic session. We passed $650 million in tax relief. We passed the largest transportation package in years without a gas tax increase. We reduced health care costs, and we reformed some of the issues that are holding back our ability to change health care and reform health insurance. I individually brought over $30 million in bonding money to this district. I carried multiple pieces of legislation to address workforce issues, to support our students who are trying to afford college, and our families that are trying to find housing and daycare. I'm proud of the work I did, and I enjoyed serving you so much. I have proven to this community that I can solve problems, I can build partnerships, I can deliver on the promises. I believe I've earned your trust, and I look forward to asking for your vote again to serve in that manner for another 2 years. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Lorianne.
Okay, I have to admit, this has been a little tense tonight for me, so thank you for hanging in there with me. You know, 2 years ago, I got involved with a group called Indivisible Cannon Falls. And very quickly, we decided to focus on local and state politics because that's where we felt that we had the most impact. And one of the amazing pieces that's happened for me in the last 2 years is realizing, especially out talking with people and going to, the various government meetings and committees, is to know that all of us want good government. We want good government at a fair price, without all the drama. And we want to come to the middle. We really want to find the solutions that will work for all of us and move on to the next issue. And the really frustrating thing about the last legislative session, which is probably one of the most ineffective sessions that Minnesota's had in years, is that none of that happened. But what you find after 2016 is look at all the people that have stepped up and gotten involved. Look at all the progressive groups. Look at all the people that have stepped forward and say, this issue is important to me, we need to do something about it. All the people that say, we need our youth to vote, we need people to get involved. We don't want you to be cynical. Don't be cynical about our government. Have hope that we can and will do it better. Right now, today, especially today, we need to demand more of our politicians and our politics. I want your vote because I think I can make a difference in St. Paul. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you to the candidates, the audience, league members, and the City of Red Wing for tonight's candidate forum for Minnesota House District 21A. I invite you to learn more about League of Women Voters and to consider joining. Information is available in the lobby. Please consider this your call to action to vote, either early or on November 6th. Let's show our appreciation by giving a round of applause.